darlings, Mimi G here with another sew along as part of my Mimi G for Simplicity pattern collection. I'm so excited about my fall coat. Hopefully you've already watched the video on how to sew together our cape, and we're going to move on to sewing our coat. Now there are a ton of pieces for this coat and it is fully lined, so we are going to up your skill level just a little bit. But don't worry, I take you through every single step so you won't be lost. If you're new to sewing or you need a refresher course, I strongly suggest that you view the video Sewing Basics linked in the description box below so that you can get a refresher on how to cut the proper size, how to cut out your pattern pieces, how to lay your pattern pieces onto your fabric, how to understand all the information that is printed on your pattern pieces, and a whole lot more. Once you watch that video, come back and sew along with me. Alright, let's go over the pattern pieces that you need to cut for this coat. Remember that you want to make sure that you are reading all of the information on the pattern piece that will tell you if you need to cut 2 out of fabric, 2 out of interfacing, 2 out of lining, so that you have all of the pieces that you need. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 3. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 2. You're also going to be cutting pattern piece number 2 out of lining. You're going to cut your belt out, pattern piece number 18. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 12, which is the front facing of our coat, and you are going to be interfacing it. You are going to be cutting out pattern piece number 4, which is our side back. You're also going to be cutting that out of lining. Pattern piece number 17 does not get cut out of fabric, lining, or otherwise. This is a button guide which we will use at the very end to know where to place our buttonholes and buttons. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 13 out of fabric and interfacing. Pattern piece number 7. We're going to cut out our pocket, pattern piece number 9. We're going to cut out 4 of pattern piece number 8, which is our sleeve tabs. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 11, which is our flap for our pocket. You're also going to be interfacing it and cutting it out of lining. You're going to be cutting out the lining of our pocket. Our sleeves, pattern piece number 16 out of lining. Pattern piece number 15 out of lining. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 14 out of lining. Pattern piece number 1, and pattern piece number 5, which is our sleeve out of fabric, and pattern piece number 6, which is the sleeve, also the front and back sleeve out of fabric. Okay, let's start sewing the coat. I want you to grab your back piece and I want you to grab your side backs. And with right sides facing, you're going to pin, the way I have here, your side back to your back. And make sure that you are aligning your notches. You should have 2 notches to let you know that you're doing it right and that the right piece is going on to the right piece. And you're going to sew that using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to attach the other side back the same exact way, and then I want you to press your seams open. Okay, now that you have your back and your side backs attached, you're going to do the same thing with your front and your side front. So you're going to align notches. Same way that we did before, make sure your notches are aligned. And I want you to pin. You're going to pin all the way down, making sure that you're aligning your notches and pinning there, because we're going to need to ease in between these notches. As you can see, we have a little give. Continue pinning all the way down. You're going to notice that your side front is longer than your front, as you can see here. and it's supposed to be that way. It'll all make sense when we attach our lining. And go ahead and start stitching from the bottom up, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to do the same thing with your other side, front, and front piece. Then you're going to press these seams open, and then we'll attach our front to our back. Now that you should have all of your seams pressed open, we're going to attach our fronts to our sides, or actually our side front to our side back, I should say. So go ahead and pin, align your notches. And I want you to start sewing from the bottom up. You're going to do the same thing to the other sides. I want you to do the other one the same exact way and then press these seams opened as well. Okay, I want you to set your jacket aside, your coat aside for just a second, and I want you to grab your lining pieces. Now I have already sewn together my lining, and you're going to sew your lining the same exact way that we sewed our center back to our side backs, our side fronts to our fronts, and then our side fronts to our side backs. So just if you need to rewind, go ahead and rewind, and then you're going to sew those pieces together the same exact way. You're going to attach your side backs to your back and your side fronts to your side backs. You are not attaching your fronts facings just yet. So again, you're only going to attach for your lining your side back to your back and your side front to your side backs. Set your lining aside once it's sewn together, and set your coat aside, and we're going to do some sewing on our pockets and our belt loops. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab your belt loop, and as you can see I have pressed mine to the center, and then you're going to press it again in half, and we're going to sew close to the edge. Go ahead and set this aside for just a second. And I want you to grab your sleeve tabs. So you should have 4 of these. I have already sewn one, so this is what it's going to look like. So with right sides facing, we're going to sew across or down the long sides of both sides. And we're using our 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to trim the sides down. And then I want you to push through so that we can start to see the right side. Now go ahead and give this a press, and once you do that, we're going to top stitch it. So I'm going to keep my presser foot edge along the edge of my fabric. give this one final press and set those aside. I want you to grab your pocket and your pocket lining, and you'll notice that your pocket lining is smaller than your pocket. So what we're going to do is first we are going to align our notches along the top and pin. And we're going to leave an opening. So I want you to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. But you're going to leave about a 2-inch opening right in the center. And then you're going to pull down your lining so that it matches the bottom. And you're going to pin. We're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. As you can tell, I have pulled it down, so you see the fold over here. I'm going to have you trim. And I'm going to cut out a couple of notches here in the corners, like that, to remove some of that bulk in the rounded corners. And then through that opening, you're going to pull your pocket through and you're going to go give it a good press. Make sure you poke out your corners. And you're also going to make sure when you press this that you slip stitch your opening closed. Okay? So go ahead and give this a good press. Once you've pressed your pocket, it should look really nice and neat like this, and then fully lined on the inside. So you're going to set that aside. You're going to do the other pocket the same exact way that you just did this one. Then I want you to grab your pocket flaps. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay them right sides facing, so the right side of my fabric and the right side of my lining. And you're going to pin in place. And we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to trim like you did your pocket, and then turn this right side out and give it a good press, and do the other one the same exact way. Once you've pressed your flap, you should have marked for your buttonhole. So you're going to need your your sewing machine instruction manual on how to make a buttonhole using your machine, because all machines are different. So go ahead and make your buttonhole on here, and you're going to make sure that you have both pockets and both flaps done, and that you've put your buttonhole in on each of these flaps. Okay, now I want you to grab your front sleeve and your back sleeve, and with right sides facing each other, we're going to sew down the curved long edge. So I want you to pin. Make sure that you are aligning your notches. Okay. And starting at the bottom, we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've sewn down this side, I want you to do the other sleeve the same way, and then I want you to press your seams open. We are not going to sew this side just yet, so just do this side on both sleeves. So you did it for this one, now grab your other front and back and do the same thing. Okay, you should have your sleeve seam allowances pressed open, and it should be laying flat, and you should have markings where your shoulder tabs, not your shoulder tabs, your sleeve tabs are going to go. That's these, right? So they're going to go here, and you should have 2 dots indicating where they're going to go. And then in the middle, I've made a marking so that I know where I need to put my loops. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab your carriers, and you're going to cut them into 4 equal parts. So we need 2 for here, and then we're going to need 2 for our belts. So what you're going to do is you are going to place them where your carrier is going to, where your sleeve tab is going to go. I'm going to align mine with the bottom. That's this bottom here, right? It's going to go over like this. I'm going to place it right there, and I'm going to stitch it down. And then I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to turn under that 3/8, and I'm going to stitch the very top, keeping it at the center of that seam line that you see. Go slow through all thicknesses. Once you have your carrier in place, go ahead and trim off any loose threads. Grab your sleeve tab, and then you're going to stitch it down on both sides. Now you can go ahead and fold this in half and pin. Make sure that you align your sleeve tabs, okay, so that they are perfectly aligned when you sew this together. So I'm going to pin there. And then I'm going to continue pinning, and then we're going to sew this closed using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you're going to do the other sleeve the same exact way. Cut off any loose threads, give this a good press, and do the other sleeve the same way. Okay, now we're going to stitch down our pocket. Okay, so you should have a marking, a line where your flap should go, and a dot where your pocket is going to go. I have already done this one, as you can see. And so now what you're going to do is you're going to first place your pocket where you marked your dots. and you're going to pin. And pin at the rounded corners just to keep everything together. Pin at the center. And we're going to sew really close to that edge, okay? So just go really slow if you need to. Go slow around the corners. Okay, once you do that, you're going to then grab your flap and you're going to place it right side down like this, along that line, okay? And then you're going to pin and pin, just so it doesn't move. And then we're going to stitch it down. Go ahead and cut off any loose threads. And then you're going to fold over your pocket. And I'm going to pin mine at each corner here just so that it stays down. I'll hand stitch my buttons at the very end. And we're going to top stitch across the top of our pocket flap. Like this, and then cut off any loose threads, and you're going to do the other pocket the same way. Okay, now that you're done with both pockets and flaps, we are going to pin our carriers to our coat. Now you should have 2 dots where your carriers were going to be, so you should have marked them. I went ahead and marked the center so that I know where the middle of my carriers is going to be. And so what you're going to do is you're going to stitch them down the same way that we did for our sleeve tabs. Cut off my loose threads, and you're going to do the same thing with your other carrier. Once you've done your carriers, we're going to set this aside for just a second. And I want you to finish your sleeve lining. Now, you're going to sew them exactly the same. The only difference is there are no shoulder or sleeve tabs or loops for the sleeve. So you're just going to place them right sides facing, and you're going to sew down the sides. You're going to turn it over and give it a good press. And then we're going to grab our lining and our facings. So grab your lining, and you're going to grab your front facings and your back facing. This is your back facing and your front facings. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this down at the shoulder like this, right sides facing each other. Go ahead and pin. And go ahead and pin. Align your notches at the shoulder. And we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to do the other one the same way. I want you to press this open on both shoulders. And for just 1 second, we're going to set that aside. And we're going to attach our sleeves to our coat. What we're going to do here is we are going to align our notches. But first, I want you to pin the underarm seam to the side seam of our coat and pin. Make sure as you're pinning your sleeve to your coat that your double notches for the back line up, and pin there. And pin at the top. And then continue making sure that your front notches match. Of course, you're pinning with right sides facing. And then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to sew our sleeve to our coat. Now we've sewn our sleeve to our coat, and you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, go ahead and grab your lining. You should have sewn your sleeves onto your lining the same way that you sewed them onto your coat. And now we're going to attach our facing. So what we're going to do is, with right sides facing, we're going to start at the back. Get this together. Okay, and you should have 2 notches on the back and 2 notches on the back facing. And so you're going to pin there first. And then you're going to align your shoulder seams. And you're going to pin there. And you're going to continue aligning notches and pinning until you've pinned your entire facing onto your lining. Once you aligned all of your notches, if there were areas that needed to be eased in, then you should go ahead and make your little snips into your coat so that you can ease that excess in. You may also want to clip around any rounded areas so that your lining can sit flat onto your facing. So I want you to do that. Make sure you did that all the way around. And then starting at the bottom of one end, we're going to sew starting about 2 inches from the edge. You should have a dot. We're going to start about 1 inch above that dot that's towards the bottom. And we're going to be sewing using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that we have our facing attached to our lining, you can go ahead and trim and clip your curves as you need to. Once you press it, it should look like this. There shouldn't be any puckers or any pleats. It should be really nice and smooth. And now what we're going to do is we're going to attach our lining to our jacket. Now, jacket's probably getting a little heavier and heavier, so just take your time. And we're going to start by pinning our lining to our coat at the center back, and you should have some notches there. Go ahead and start to pin. We're going to pin along the entire front and around the neck. Just continue pinning until the entire neck of your coat and lining are pinned together and the entire front openings are pinned together. Once you have it all pinned out, we're going to start sewing it down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting at one end. Go ahead and trim your corners, and you may want to cut some notches into the rounded parts of your collar or your neck. You want to make sure to remove some of that excess so that when you turn this over you don't have a lot of bulk. And so do that in a couple of areas. Careful not to cut into your stitching. Once you've done that, I want you to go ahead and pin the bottom. Make sure that you are aligning at your seams, and pin. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side, and you're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that you are keeping your lining free and pinning at that, or starting at that dot that you should have marked, and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to stitch the bottom closed. Again, clip into this corner. And do the same thing on the other side. And now what I want you to do is I want you to bring together your lining and the bottom edge of your jacket. So you're just going to pull, and you're going to pin. And you're going to do this the entire way around, making sure that you are aligning your seam lines with your seam lines. you're going to continue doing this all the way along the hem of your coat and your lining. You want to make sure that you leave a nice size opening so that you can turn your coat all the way out through that opening. So I'm going to leave about a 6-inch opening and then continue sewing. And now what you're going to do is you're going to pull your coat through that opening that you left. So do it slowly. Pull your sleeve lining through your sleeve. And then through that same opening, stick your hand in and you want to poke out any corners. And then you're going to press all the way around. You want to press all of your edges. Okay, once you pressed your coat all the way around and you have pressed your hem so it looks nice and beautiful and really clean, you're going to slip stitch that closed there when we're all done, so that's kind of homework for you. And then you're going to also slip stitch that opening that we left to turn our coat right side out. And remember that you have to do it on both ends here, okay? And now we're going to set this aside for 1 second and we're going to finish off the sleeve hem that we have. Alright, the last thing we need to sew up here is our sleeve to our sleeve lining. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure first that they're separated. Okay, so I don't want you to have one inside the other. And I want you to pull through the opening at the bottom, your lining. And then I want you to reach in and then also pull out your sleeve. Coat's getting a little heavy. Okay, through that opening. And now what we're going to do is we are going to sew these together, aligning our seam lines, but we're working with right sides facing. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're facing the right side of your lining to the right side of your sleeve, and you're going to be aligning your seam lines first, and we're going to pin. And we're going to pin all the way around with right sides together. And then we're going to, so it should look like this when it's pinned. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start to sew, going slow and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to sew all the way around this. Just go slow and move your coat out of the way as much as you can. Snip into your lining if you need to. So when you're done, you should have sewn it together like this, right? And then just go ahead and stuff it back in there and then pull it out through the coat. And then you can press it and you end up with a really clean finish and no hand stitching on your lining, right? So the inside looks completely finished. Go ahead and give this a good press. And then the only thing left to do is to make our buttonholes, which you will do by using the buttonhole guide. You're simply going to lay it over the top of your coat, and you're going to mark where your buttonholes go. And of course you will have to do that using your instruction manual. And then you will hand sew your buttons. Now we're going to finish off by doing our belt. So we're going to fold our belt in half. And we're going to pin. We're going to leave an opening in the center so that we can turn this around. And we're going to sew all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now go ahead and trim your corners and then pull each end out through the opening. You can use a point turner if you have one, or sometimes I just use a pen or a pencil, whatever I have handy really. And you're just going to push through until you reach the opening that you left. And you're going to do that for both sides. Use a pin to pull out my corner. I went ahead and pressed my belt, and top stitching is optional. I am going to top stitch, so I'm going to place the edge of my presser foot along the edge of my fabric, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around my belt. Okay, once you're done top stitching, we are going to go ahead and put our buckle through now. I am tying off my buckle. That's kind of the style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over so that I know exactly how far I need to fold to know that I can get up under my sewing machine, right? So if I fold it over too little and then try, my buckle's going to be in my way. There's no way to move it out. So depending on your buckle, you want to make sure that you fold over however much you need so that you can make sure that you can get under your sewing machine. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this sew along, and I can't wait to see all of the amazing things you guys are going to create from my patterns. Make sure if you post on social media that you tag me at Mimi G Style and use my hashtag SewingIsSexy. Until next time, peace.